A little girl in overalls watches from a courtroom balcony as her father, a small-town Alabama lawyer, stands almost alone against the racism of his entire town, defending a black man he knows is innocent but cannot save. That lawyer is Atticus Finch, and decades later, the American Film Institute would vote him the single greatest movie hero in a century of cinema. This is To Kill a Mockingbird, released in 1962, adapted from Harper Lee's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, and starring Gregory Peck in the role of his life. It's a story about childhood, courage, and conscience, seen through the eyes of Atticus's young daughter Scout, and it remains one of the most beloved and most taught films ever made in America. But behind this quiet, powerful film lies a debut by a future legend, a set built from a vanished town, and a real father whose pocket watch would end up in Gregory Peck's hand on Oscar night. Fact 20. A future Hollywood legend made his debut, and you barely see his face. One of the most famous first appearances in movie history is hiding in this film. The mysterious, shut-in neighbor, Boo Radley, spoken about in fearful whispers by the children, but unseen for most of the story, is played by Robert Duvall in his very first feature film. Duvall would go on to become one of the greatest actors of his generation, from The Godfather to Apocalypse Now. But here at the start, he's almost invisible. Boo has essentially no dialogue, and Duvall's face doesn't even appear until roughly the 2-hour mark in the film's emotional climax. To look like a man who had spent years locked away from the world, Duvall prepared by staying out of the sunlight for 6 weeks and dyeing his hair blonde, turning himself pale and ghostly. A titanic career began with a silent, shadowed few minutes. Fact 19. Atticus Finch was based on Harper Lee's own father. Atticus Finch was not invented. He was a loving portrait of a real man. Harper Lee based the character directly on her own father, Amasa Coleman Lee, a lawyer in Monroeville, Alabama. Like Atticus, Amasa Lee was a widower who raised his children largely on his own, and a principled attorney willing to defend black men falsely accused of crimes. Before filming, Gregory Peck traveled to Monroeville with the director and producer to meet the ailing, elderly Amasa Lee in person. That encounter shaped Peck's whole performance. He came away looking and sounding uncannily like the real man. When Harper Lee first saw Peck on set in full character, she reportedly burst into tears and blurted out, "He's got a little potbelly, just like my daddy." Peck replied, "That's no potbelly, Harper. That's great acting." Fact 18. Peck's devastating courtroom speech was filmed in a single take. The dramatic heart of To Kill a Mockingbird is Atticus Finch's closing argument to the jury, a long, quietly furious plea for justice as he defends Tom Robinson, urging 12 white Southern men to see a black man as a human being, equal before the law. It's one of the most celebrated monologues in film history. And astonishingly, Gregory Peck delivered the whole thing, running roughly 6.5 minutes on screen, in a single, unbroken take. There were no cuts to hide behind, no chance to stitch together the best moments from several attempts. Peck simply stood before the camera and carried the entire speech through in one flawless performance. It's a masterclass in acting discipline, and a big part of why the scene lands with such overwhelming moral weight. He earned that Oscar in one take. Fact 17. The little boy Dill was based on the author Truman Capote. Scout and Jem's imaginative summertime friend, Dill Harris, the small, odd storytelling boy who dreams up schemes to lure out Boo Radley, was based on a real childhood friend of Harper Lee's, none other than Truman Capote, the future author of Breakfast at Tiffany's and In Cold Blood. Lee and Capote grew up as next-door neighbors in Monroeville, Alabama, and stayed close throughout their lives. The bond runs deep in the storytelling itself. In the film, there's a small rock wall that Dill hops over to reach the Finch house, a detail drawn from real life, echoing how the young Capote would come over to visit Lee. The influence flowed both ways, too. Capote based a character in his own early novel on Lee. Two of America's great writers immortalizing each other as children. Fact 16. Gregory Peck read the novel overnight and said yes the next morning. When producer Alan J. Pakula and director Robert Mulligan sent Gregory Peck a copy of Harper Lee's novel, they were hoping he'd consider playing Atticus. Peck sat down with the book and couldn't stop. He read it straight through in one night. By 8 the next morning, he was on the phone, and his answer wasn't a maybe. As Peck recalled it, he told them, "If you want me to play Atticus, when do I start? I'd love to play it." He felt an immediate personal connection to the character, the kind of decent, thoughtful father he understood in his bones, and to the two children at the story's heart. It's rare for a great actor to find the role he was born to play. Gregory Peck knew, overnight, that he'd found his. Fact 15. The gentle, childlike score came from a master of the epic. Part of what gives To Kill a Mockingbird its tender, nostalgic feeling is its music, composed by Elmer Bernstein. The score is famous for its simplicity, delicate, music box-like piano notes that capture the wonder, innocence, and faint melancholy of childhood, perfectly matching the film's view of the world through a child's eyes. What makes it striking is that Bernstein was better known for big, muscular scores, having written the thundering music for epics and westerns like The Ten Commandments and The Magnificent Seven. For Mockingbird, he did the opposite, stripping everything back to something small, fragile, and intimate. He considered it some of his finest work, and it earned an Academy Award nomination. Those few soft, curious opening notes have become almost inseparable from the memory of the film itself. Fact 14. Several studios turned the film down for being too quiet. Today, it seems obvious that To Kill a Mockingbird was destined to be a classic, but at the time, much of Hollywood wasn't interested. A number of studios passed on the project, reportedly because the story lacked the things they thought a hit needed: no real action and no romance. A gentle, talky drama about a small-town lawyer, his children, and a courtroom trial simply didn't look commercial. The man who believed in it was producer Alan J. Pakula, who refused to give up and persuaded director Robert Mulligan to come aboard. Together they convinced Gregory Peck to sign on, and that changed everything. In the end, the uncommercial film was a major box office success, reportedly earning more than 6 times its budget, proof that audiences were hungry for exactly the quiet, human story the studios had dismissed. Fact 13. The two child stars had never acted in a film before. So much of the film's power comes from how natural its children feel, and that's because they weren't seasoned movie kids. Scout is played by Mary Badham, and her brother Jem by Philip Alford, both young, largely untrained newcomers from Birmingham, Alabama, close to the story's real Southern roots. Their unforced, believable performances gave the film its authentic child's-eye view of a confusing adult world. Mary Badham, only around 10 years old, was so good that she earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, making her one of the youngest performers ever nominated at that time. Her scout, tough, curious, and fiercely loyal to her father, remains one of the great child performances in film. Two ordinary Alabama kids, cast for their realness, ended up anchoring a masterpiece. Fact 12. One of its most moving moments has almost no dialogue. After Atticus loses the trial and the courtroom empties, one of the most quietly devastating scenes in all of cinema unfolds. Scout has watched the whole trial from the colored balcony, seated among the black townspeople segregated upstairs. As her exhausted, defeated father gathers his papers below and walks out, every single black spectator in the balcony rises silently to their feet in respect for him. The reverend beside Scout gently tells her, "Miss Jean Louise, stand up. Your father's passing." It's a scene that captures the film's whole moral heart in a single gesture. Dignity, gratitude, and grief, without speeches. Even in defeat, Atticus has earned something no verdict could take away. It routinely leaves audiences in tears, and it does its work almost entirely through silence, posture, and one soft, unforgettable line. Fact 11. Boo Radley was cast because of a single stage performance. Robert Duvall didn't land the role of Boo Radley by luck. He was handpicked by the film's screenwriter, Horton Foote. Foote, who adapted Harper Lee's novel into the screenplay, had seen the young Duvall give a striking performance in a stage play at a New York playhouse, and remembered it when it came time to cast the elusive Boo. That recommendation got Duvall the part and launched his film career, and the connection paid off again decades later. Duvall went on to win the Academy Award for Best Actor for the film Tender Mercies, which was also written by Horton Foote. So the writer who gave Duvall his very first screen role also, years later, handed him the material that won him Hollywood's highest acting honor. Foote himself won an Oscar for adapting Mockingbird. Fact 10. The town of Maycomb was built on a Hollywood backlot. The film's Alabama setting feels so real that many viewers assume it was shot on location in the Deep South. In fact, the fictional town of Maycomb was recreated on the Universal Studios backlot in Hollywood. The filmmakers had wanted to shoot in Harper Lee's real hometown of Monroeville, Alabama, the basis for Maycomb. But by the early 1960s, the town had modernized too much to pass for the 1930s. So they rebuilt it in California, even moving real houses from a neighborhood being demolished onto the lot. For the courtroom, they used the old Monroe County Courthouse in Monroeville as their model, since the real building's acoustics were too poor to film in. The recreation was so faithful that many Alabamians who saw the finished film were convinced it had been shot right there in Monroeville. Fact 9. The actor playing Tom Robinson gave Gregory Peck's eulogy. Tom Robinson, the gentle, wrongly accused man whose trial drives the story, is played by Brock Peters in a heartbreaking performance, especially in his testimony on the witness stand. Out of that film grew a genuine lifelong friendship between Peters and Gregory Peck. The two men stayed close for the rest of Peck's life. And when Gregory Peck died in 2003, it was Brock Peters who delivered a moving eulogy at his funeral. In it, he quoted Harper Lee's assessment that Atticus Finch gave him an opportunity to play himself, and closed by bidding farewell to my friend Gregory Peck, to my friend Atticus Finch, with the words, "Vaya con Dios." Peters called the role of Tom Robinson one of the proudest achievements of his life. He also stayed close to Mary Badham for years. Fact 8. Boo Radley is the whole story, yet he barely appears. There's a beautiful narrative trick at the center of To Kill a Mockingbird. For nearly the entire film, Boo Radley exists only as a legend, a bogeyman the children of Maycomb whisper about, imagining him as a monstrous figure lurking in a dark, decaying house, glimpsed only through their fearful games and dares. He is talked about constantly, but never actually seen. Then, in the film's final act, after the trial and its tragic aftermath, Boo steps out of the shadows for real, quietly saving the children from a genuine threat. The great reveal that the monster is in fact a shy, gentle, deeply human soul is the emotional payoff the whole story has been building toward. It's a lesson in not judging people, delivered by making the audience wait 2 hours to finally, tenderly meet the man behind the myth. Fact 7. 2 of its actors reunited in The Godfather Part 2. Here's a piece of trivia that connects a gentle 1962 drama to one of the greatest crime epics ever made. 2 performers from To Kill a Mockingbird, Robert Duvall, who played Boo Radley, and John Magna, who played the little boy Dill, both went on to appear in The Godfather Part 2 in 1974. Duvall, of course, became a Godfather mainstay as the Corleone family's cool, calculating lawyer Tom Hagen. Magna, the child actor who played Scout and Jem's imaginative friend, turned up in a small role in the same sequel. Curiously, though, the 2 never actually shared a scene together. It's a strange little thread linking the sun-dappled innocence of Maycomb to the shadowy world of the Corleones, a reminder of how tangled and surprising the web of Hollywood careers can be. Fact 6. Gregory Peck and his young co-star stayed close for the rest of his life. The bond between Gregory Peck and Mary Badham didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. It lasted for decades. The actor and the little girl who played his daughter formed a genuine, lifelong friendship, and by many accounts, Badham continued to call Peck by the name Atticus for the rest of his life, long after she'd grown up. The warmth you see between father and daughter on screen was in part real affection that carried on off-screen. It speaks to the kind of man Peck was, and to how deeply the making of this film touched everyone involved. Peck himself often said that of all the many films in his long career, To Kill a Mockingbird was the one people brought up to him most, and the one that meant the most to him personally. Fact 5. Its legacy today is more complicated than it once was. For decades, To Kill a Mockingbird was held up as a straightforward landmark of moral courage, and it's worth remembering how bold it was in its moment. Released in 1962, just as the American Civil Rights Movement was reaching a boil, it put the ugliness of Southern racism and injustice on screen for a mass audience, and asked white viewers to confront it. In that context, it was genuinely brave. But in more recent years, the film has also drawn thoughtful criticism. Some argue it's an early example of the white savior story, one where a black man's suffering mainly serves to teach white characters a moral lesson, while Tom Robinson himself remains a fairly passive figure with little voice of his own. Both things can be true. A film can be a courageous product of its time and still be fairly re-examined by a later one. Fact 4. Atticus Finch was voted the greatest movie hero of all time. Of all the heroes in a century of cinema, the action stars, the crime fighters, the swashbucklers, the one the American Film Institute crowned the greatest of all, was not a soldier or a superhero, but a quiet, bookish, middle-aged, small-town lawyer. In 2003, the AFI ranked Atticus Finch as the #1 movie hero of the past 100 years, ahead of the likes of Indiana Jones and James Bond. It's a remarkable statement about what real heroism looks like. Atticus never throws a punch in anger. His courage is moral, not physical. He stands up for what's right when it costs him everything and wins him nothing, faces down a hostile town with calm dignity, and teaches his children to walk in another person's shoes. Gregory Peck's Atticus proved that the bravest thing on screen can simply be a good man doing the right thing. And it won 3 Oscars, but lost the big one to an epic. To Kill a Mockingbird was a major awards contender, nominated for 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director for Robert Mulligan, the only Oscar nomination of Mulligan's career. It won 3: Best Actor for Gregory Peck, Best Adapted Screenplay for Horton Foote, and Best Art Direction, honoring that painstakingly recreated town of Maycomb. But the top prize eluded it. 1962 was a giant year at the movies, and Best Picture went instead to David Lean's sweeping desert epic Lawrence of Arabia. In the Best Actor race, Peck triumphed over Peter O'Toole, who had played Lawrence himself. So the intimate story of a small-town lawyer beat the grand epic where it mattered most to Peck, in the acting. Even as the epic claimed the night's biggest award, both films are now regarded as all-time classics. Fact 2. It was chosen for permanent preservation as a national treasure. To Kill a Mockingbird hasn't just endured, it's been officially enshrined. In 1995, the film was selected by the Library of Congress for inclusion in the United States National Film Registry, which preserves movies deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant to America's heritage, marking it for protection for future generations. And its influence reaches far beyond film buffs. The story remains a fixture of school classrooms across the country and around the world, one of the most widely taught works about justice, empathy, and prejudice ever written. Generations of young people have met Scout, Jem, Atticus, and Boo not just on screen, but on the page, wrestling with the same hard questions the film asks. Few movies have been folded so completely into a nation's sense of its own conscience. Fact 1. Harper Lee gave Gregory Peck her late father's pocket watch. We end where the character began, with the real man who inspired Atticus Finch. By the time filming was finished, Harper Lee's father, Amasa Lee, the model for Atticus, had died. To thank Gregory Peck for how truthfully and lovingly he had brought her father to life, Harper Lee gave the actor an extraordinary, deeply personal gift: her father's gold pocket watch, the very timepiece the real lawyer had carried with him to court for some 40 years. Peck was profoundly moved, and on Oscar night, April 8, 1963, when Gregory Peck walked to the stage to accept the Academy Award for Best Actor for playing Atticus Finch, Harper Lee's father's watch was in his pocket. A real Alabama lawyer, a novelist's love for her dad, and an actor's finest hour, all ticking away together in one small gold watch. And that's 20 facts about To Kill a Mockingbird, a quiet masterpiece built on a real father, a silent debut, and a courtroom speech for the ages, the film that made a gentle lawyer the greatest hero in movie history. If you enjoyed this one, subscribe for a brand new countdown every week, and tell us which classic we should stand up for next.